3 of my 2 for 22 challenge. I was deadlifting, and Carl offered me a spot because he brought plenty of them for everybody. And now I have to do some push-ups. We're talking about PTSD in the context of the armed forces. And it's one thing to wave my arms around and say PTSD awareness, and it's something else entirely. Actually be aware of what happens and how these things come about. And I talk about the First World War a lot. I'm going to post one of these every day. So if you want the story from the start, you probably need to go back. Which way's back? I don't know. You probably need to go back to the first one. But we've established that the generals didn't really know how to deal with trench warfare and barbed wire and machine guns, because they trained as generals when it was all about cavalry. And you could use your cavalry charge and break the enemy line and so forth. And that works great until they're entrenched behind a heap of barbed wire with a machine gun. And they start using artillery to shell each other. It doesn't really work particularly well the first few times they do it. But later on in the war, it gets to the point where they're spending tens of thousands of shells in a day, and they're not making any ground. But the men in the trenches are there the whole time. So what I've got today is, before we get into the accounts of the actual soldiers, I've got today is an idea of where this idea of shell shock comes from. Is that soldiers get so exposed to this artillery barrage and this amount of noise over so long, and they can't cope afterwards. And the reason I wanted to talk about the First World War a lot is that this is where we first saw the term shell shock. And although we've seen examples of it throughout history, I'm looking at my notes, by the way, because I got something wrong yesterday and I was embarrassed. The reason the First World War is so interesting in the context of PTSD is we never really saw this idea of shell shock globally before. So what I've got today is a couple of quotes, and they're real quotes this time, Nick. I'm on to you. From Captain Frank Hurley, who was actually a photographer, not even a soldier, but he says, quote, August 23, near Hill 60. They made a good movie about that. The exaggerated machinations of hell are here typified. Everywhere the ground is littered with bits of guns, bayonets, shells, and men. Oh, the frightfulness of it all, until my dying day I shall never forget. He's describing PTSD, and then again, a month later, 20th of September, almost a month later, he's describing an artillery barrage, and he says, quote, promptly on the tick of 5, there held a blinding sheet of flame and the roar. Nothing I have heard in this world or can hear in the next could possibly approach its equal. And I'll post a photo under the video on Facebook. If you're just watching this on YouTube, probably not, because I'm lazy. I'll post a photo of what a shell-shocked soldier looks like, and we see the beginnings. I'm sure it's happened before then, but we see the beginnings of the identification of what PTSD is in soldiers and how it can come about. And now, despite having done I don't know how many rounds with the Kings this afternoon, and then deadlifts, and then dealt with a dog who's run off, we have to do some push-ups for Wendell.